First of all, hi to all of my mentalist friends in India, and for those of you who don't know me, my name's Fraser Parker, and I'm a mentalist from the UK, and I'm going to be joining Bharath on his YouTube channel Mallugic to share with you my approach to modern mentalism, as well as let you in on some of my journey throughout the art form so far. So I hope you guys really enjoy this, and I can't wait to see you all there.
Hey buddy, how are you?
Hey man, how's it going?
I'm doing well. What about you?
I'm good, man. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on this. I'm looking forward to
Thank you so
rambling.
much for accepting the invitation. It's my pleasure to have you. So, you are the kind of like a person who is like a gray area in the mentalism field, right? And like
Yeah.
I know a lot about you, but let's hear it from you itself. So, with that being said, let's start the session. So, let me ask you a very common cliche question, which I think you have answered at least more than 100 times. But still, let's start the session with that common question. So,
Okay.
how did you get started in mentalism, and how you became the student of Kenton Knepper?
Okay. So essentially, it sort of started fairly late in life. I know that a lot of magicians tend to get into magic quite early, and sometimes that can be a good thing or a bad thing because you can tend to sort of learn how others are doing it, almost through osmosis, kind of. And it's obviously important to look at what's come before. But when I first looked at magic, it was really odd because I wasn't sort of I wasn't happy with how I found magic, and I think it was because in my head I had sort of imagined that it would be closer to real in some sense. I remember as a child, my dad had a magic book on the shelf, and this was Mark Wilson's Course in Magic. And so I just, curiously took it off the shelf one day and started looking through it. And I remember reading, it was sort of divided between effect and method, how we, the classics are taught in books. And I remember reading the effect, and it sounded amazing. It's like you could, break a matchstick and then it would restore. And when I turned the page and went to the method, I was just completely sort of disillusioned. And so I just thought to myself, how is that magic? Like hiding one match in a fold of a napkin to then switch it out. So maybe I was quite naive, because later on when I got serious about magic and into it and into creating my own stuff and reading, the sort of master's work on it and what's come before, I realized that switching is really important, But I just remember as a child, and then later on when I finally got into magic, just thinking, I'm not really happy with the methods. And since then I've come full circle in my thinking, because people who know my work will know that I kind of went down a path almost on my own. I mean, I had, my mentor, Kenton, who you mentioned, which we'll get to, and a few other peers and friends that were also trying to push things. But it was almost like I had to find my own way to do things. And I remember one day reading this method that's in Paul Harris' Art of Astonishment. I think it's Overkill. And I loved like the principle behind it. And I tried to take like a sleight out, then I tried to take out another part of the process, and I ended up literally just with a deck of cards and nothing moving physically, nothing happening, and no effect. And I thought, I'm in a real like bad position here, because because I'm not able to do anything, it seemed, because I wasn't happy with the compromises, how they existed at the time. And that sort of started off the journey of finding Kenton. And because I felt that perhaps magic must, like mind reading for instance, must exist in the mind. Like, why can't words be the tool and be the method? And that was after watching Darren Brown as well, and believing at the time that he was genuinely using suggestion, right, and not sort of combining it with classic mentalism and magic methodology as well. And I think a lot of us were fooled back then as well, early on, getting into magic when we didn't sort of understand fully what was happening, before we learnt the ways. And then Kenton Knepper, he was associated with Luc Jamay, who was also associated with Darren at the time, because I think he was on board as a consultant as well. And Kenton wrote Luc Jamay's first book, or helped edit it for him. So that was 7 Deceptions. So I bought that, and I realized that words could be used as a way to sort of get into method, and they can be combined suggestion can be combined with more classic methods as well. But even then, I still wanted to push it, and that's kind of the drive for my work. And Kenton, obviously, with Wonder Words and his various different approaches and methodologies, he was kind of the person that opened my eyes to what could be possible, and then I just pushed it myself. So I ended up, like, when I'm creating, I'm always looking for what I think of as like a pure form of something. Like for me, mind reading, I thought to myself, why does it need to be written down? Why does that compromise need to happen? And since then, my thinking's slowly becoming full circle again, where I realised that it's the illusion that's important. It doesn't matter about the method as long as it's clean and works well. But there's still sort of certain methods that I won't go near, and it's just a weird feeling thing for me. It's like aesthetically, outwardly, it's got to look right, but I also feel like some things just don't fit what I want to do. So again, I'm on this path of trying to push method into realms where it hasn't been before, you know, that relies purely on words and using words to create shifts in perception in others' minds. And I did some work with Ross Taylor, and he's a genius, you know, but he's not actually creating at the moment because he's got other commitments in life and other things he's focusing on. But around, I think 5 years ago, I co-wrote something with him, which was a name guess, and it was at that point where he finally sort of fully realized a principle that he was working on in his notebooks, which we now call the reframe. And I realized that this reframe was kind of in my work already, and in some of Peter Turner's work, but it was really Ross that gets the credit for applying it in such a way where it became clear this is a really useful tool for propless work, and it's something that kind of permeates all of my work. It's sort of in there in one form or another. And at the time, the reframe was kind of what we called a hard reframe, where essentially you would lead the spectator down a certain path, and that would enable you to make the effect work or gain knowledge, almost like a mental peak. And then you would bring their reality and how they were perceiving what was happening outwardly back in line with the illusion that everyone else was perceiving as being true, to the point where it became like a full circle, and then there was no way for them to backtrack. And it was almost like you were making them fall into the trap of seemingly making a mistake, and then because they feel like they've made that mistake and it's gone unnoticed by yourself as the performer, or you've not acknowledged it in any way, then it means that the information that they gave you've also disregarded, so that you just throw off the method, essentially. And then because everything comes back in line with the illusion, that's all that's left is this beautiful lie. And I think it's really nice that just with words and how what you do is in and of itself as the performance is what creates the illusion of magic. So really, for me, that's as close to real magic as you can get, because it's now it's got the appearance of magic, so it is magic, right? And why I said like this thinking was sort of in my work already was because the first project I did was True Mysteries, where I kind of focused on influence and creating the appearance of what looked like genuine hypnosis, but it was pseudo. I mean, but for me, what ended up happening was I would make it look as if hypnosis has happened, right? But I had like a shortcut to it. I didn't need an induction. I could just literally walk up to someone, and with my words and how I acted and how what took place and what happened, I looked to everyone as well as the spectator. It meant that it fooled the spectator as well. So it was kind of a subtle way of getting them to do what you wanted them to do, similar to how the reframe would be getting information in a mental peak, and then bringing them back in line with the illusion, and then being fooled by what takes place and what seems to have happened, so that they felt like they were actually influenced or under your spell or under hypnosis, for instance. So by acting as if what I was doing was so and was real, it became real for everyone. And so that kind of thinking has sort of stayed with my work. And then obviously Ross defined that in a more concrete manner in terms of how it was applied to mind reading. So he gets the credit for that. And then it became not so much how do I influence people, but how do I get information secretly. So yeah, it kind of started in a disillusionment, feeling like I needed to find my own way to do things that felt closer to real for me. And my mentors and friends helped along the way, you know. And another person I talked to most days, he rang me earlier before this interview, is Peter Turner. So we've got, you know, we have like nice jamming sessions, and we've got a real nice shorthand with Pete and a few of my other friends and soundboards. We've got a real nice shortcut now where we almost finish each other's sentences because our thinking is sort of intertwined so nicely and subtly. It's really cool. So hopefully that answers it all.
I mean, that's great, man. I mean, in the modern mentalism world, there are only few mentalists out there who use this kind of methods, like you, Peter Turner, and all. Not all mentalists does this kind of steps, and the reason is actually pretty simple because it's so hard. There are chances and probabilities that it can go wrong. So, and
Right.
it will look awkward on the stage, right? So, what I'm going to ask you is that, like you said, it doesn't matter what the method we use, but it's for our self-satisfaction that which method we use for performing, and that's why you chose this path, you know, in this, especially the Propless mentalism. The problem with the Propless, or the hardest or challenging part with the Propless mentalism, is that there are more chances that we will get misses. Like,
Right.
so in order to recover from the misses, like, we have to be very good at it. So it's like in other mentalism style, let's say we are using some other techniques in order to divine the name they are thinking or the number they are thinking. Like, there are least chances that things will go wrong.
Right.
Because we are like, it's like 100% surefire method. But in terms of Propless mentalism, it's kind of like hard though. So when misses happens, how do you recover from that situation?
Okay, so the way I look at this is, and it's good that you brought up failure, because I think Propless has got like a bad name, and I think that sort of stigma is going away more and more now with some of my releases and a few friends that have dealt in this. But I don't want you to think that I don't use classic methods as well, because I do. And I combine the two, and in performance I might only do one or two Propless pieces in each set, you know, but for me I'm trying to push it as far as it can go to the point where it's in my head a pure form. And one of the things I think that happens with the Propless performances, just to go off on a slight tangent, and I argue with friends about this, I think that they can feel the difference, because my silent script, I know that the method that I'm using is the way it's working is by shifting perception to create the illusion of magic, and I'm using words and just literally the interaction with the other person and the group. Mm-hmm. So because it feels closer to real for me, I think they can sense that I'm using a real method in quotes, right? Or is close to real. And I have argued with friends about this, that, you know, they've sort of said they don't think that it's real. But what ended up happening is the more I used this style of work mixed in with other things as well, it sort of gave a credibility to everything that I was doing. And to the point where they wouldn't necessarily feel like I was psychic, but I go for sort of that aesthetic of psychic without claiming to be psychic. I sort of go for what looks like the real thing. But I think that they sense that because it's using words, and they sense that because they're doing things literally in their mind to make this work, then it feels closer to real, I think, for them, right? So back to the failure aspect. Obviously you would use outs, right? But I don't like to just attach like bolt-on outs sort of that in my head don't seem to belong. So for instance, a good example is, say I'm doing like a stop force where they're dealing down to a card. If I miss it to the degree where I can't sort of just really elegantly verbally adjust something, I'll just fail. Like other magicians would then do a top change or a double lift or even a triple lift and still have it hit. But I've decided to embrace theatrically and aesthetically and to allow for that moment of failure in my set, so that now that in my head I think of that just as much of in terms of being a method as it would be to use like a sleight to get out of it. I just think the sleight is dirty, and in my mind I don't want to use it, and that's my problem. I know that it's not a problem for other people, but it just is for me, right? So I will literally only do a couple or maybe 3 Propless things within a set, and you know, if I hit and hit and hit, then great, I'll keep going. And I also mix it in with other physical stuff and more classical methods, because you do need to get hits, right? And you need to bolster things. And as well as this, the Propless and the physical methods can cancel each other out as well in a beautiful way. So for instance, if I got one person to write something down and I had a good justification for why they're writing it down, you know, and then I nailed it Proplessly over here with someone else, then it means in their minds that, well, it doesn't need to be written down because he did it over there without it being written down, and writing it down doesn't matter because he can do it without. So the reason that I gave within the context is the real reason they're writing it down. So they just cancel out beautifully, you know. So I plan on, you know, like if I miss one thing, that's fine for me, you know. Most of my methods are about 90% hit rates, and like you say, it's difficult, but once you go out and do this over and over, you sort of get a sense of just how to make this work. You know, you get better and better at interacting with people. For instance, you know, because a lot of my stuff relies on words and them following instructions, it means that, you know, I might need to make sure that they're fully engaged with me, and at certain points, like bring their attention back, I might need to sort of touch them on the arm if that's appropriate, and you know, or just say, look at me, and then just make sure that they're really on board. And I think that's kind of the tricky part of this. But it's just like anything else, you have to practice. It's like, you know, sleight of hand, you have to practice. You don't just go out. The first time I ever did a double lift, I got caught. But now it just happens without me thinking about it. It's part of me, and it's a subconscious thing that just happens, and it's 1 card, not 2, you know. So I don't really worry about that, and failure I don't really worry about, because I know that I'm allowing myself at least 1 miss in a set, and to the point where if my set's too perfect, I will actually fail on purpose at some point in the set, like probably second from last trick. And the reason for this is because it can also breed credibility on what you do, right? Because in my mind, if you were genuinely psychic or you could genuinely read minds, then it wouldn't always work. You know, it should be a difficult thing. Sometimes you're just not going to get something, right? So instead of pausing and looking like worried that you got it wrong, as long as you plan on this in terms of how you construct what it is you're doing theatrically and how you want your presentation to look overall, and you just take it on board that that's something that's going to happen, then it won't look like a shock, it won't look like a bump in the road, and in fact people will give you more credibility and more credit for getting close or getting one thing wrong, because it's like, if it was a trick, then they imagine that it would work every time. So I don't want to be like so slick. Like I'm slick with my scripting and how I perform, because they can tell that, you know, I do this a lot, but I don't want it to just be this perfect thing that must be a trick. For, you know, it needs to feel like it's a struggle here and there, you know. And then the best performers make it look slightly difficult. You know, they don't just instantly, you know, they don't just peek and then just go, oh, you're thinking of, you know, an elephant. They put a process into this. And another thing that I want to just clear up as well about Propless having a bad name in the past, I think Propless has been done badly in the past. You know, before we had certain methods that my friends and you know, I've discovered in more recent times, it was kind of grey elephants in Denmark, or it was like a mathematics trick that sort of just went on and on, you know. And some of my friends have criticised me in the past, saying that what you do takes too long, but they don't really know the work that well, because they've just dismissed Propless straight away, right? But what I try to do when I create is streamline everything so that I've got the most elegant and simplified method that I can get, and then I'll leave it up to other people if they want to then put their own, you know, presentation and angle on it. and I tend to do bare bones. And a lot of what I do in performance comes from a silent script. So I kind of say it without saying it, right? So obviously you need to be theatrical in it to make sense. But what's interesting is, let's say you're using a billet. Other people have added presentation to that trick so that it's not just a trick, right? So that they have a presentation and a pseudo explanation for how they're getting the information. But what I've done is that pseudo explanation has sort of become the method. So the method and effect are just running along the same lines, and they're blurred to such a degree that by the end of it, again, it's just this complete illusion of outwardly magic, of what it should look like, you know. And I tried to get that. I mean, we can probably do some performances later on, but there's one star sign guest that I'm so proud of, because it's literally conversational. It just looks like you're just giving a reading essentially, and you know the star sign. And for me, that's beautiful, because it's more elegant than throwing out letters. It's and there's also a drawing dictation where I didn't like having to use an anagram, so I took that out, and we'll probably get to that in a bit as well. And for me, like, you know, just write this down, and then obviously that's a legitimate method and it's great, but you wouldn't just present it as write it down and then reveal it. So the presentation is important. But because my method and effect run along similar lines, and the method, like the process, becomes the presentation essentially, I think it's fine. You know, sometimes I can get information quicker than I could having them write it down. And most of my like performance pieces run at about a minute and a half to 2 minutes, you know. And I don't know whether, you know, when you watch other magicians on YouTube, and, you know, I turn it off after about 30 seconds, like not 30, like after, like if nothing's happened for like a minute or a minute and a half, I turn it off, you know. And I think people don't realize just how quick the Propless stuff can be as well. For me, it's not a drawback at all, especially because I'm conscious of that while I'm creating now, and I have been for so many years, where I know that it needs to not just be this like elaborate process. So with a lot of my creations now, it's streamlined on purpose. So I don't think that problem exists anymore with the tools that we've now got and how I want to push it further.
So you have been very selective while creating certain kind of effects, right? Because if you are actually putting out some effects which uses some, you know, like very bad techniques, or if the technique feels crap, then it will affect your reputation. So I think you're being very selective while creating effects and the methods, right?
Yeah, that's it. And the easiest way to sort of show you what I mean is to perform these bits, but we can get to that in a bit.
We can get to that. And like I have like 3 to 4 questions, then we can go on to a performance. So
yeah, that's cool.
Let's actually go back to what you said about methods. Like there are different methods out in the market, so it doesn't matter for the public which method we are using it, because they don't know which method we are using. But every performance in the world can be easily influenced by the different variations or the different techniques which are available in the magic world, right? And the mentalism world as well. Talking about that, and also you have your own character, like Peter have his own character. So we cannot say it's like similar. The effects kind of what you both do is actually similar because it's Propless, but the character is actually entirely different. So the question I want to ask you is that, what's your thought about developing our own character and also not being influenced by every methods on the market? So how can we be really focused on what or which method suits us? Because the reason why I'm asking is that, let's say there are impression pad, or let's say there are peaking valets, or there are app-based mentalism effects. So everything is actually really cool and good in its own way. But how can we know that which method or technique suits us and how to build our own character in mentalism?
I think it's kind of, you know, I struggled with this when I first got into performing. And, you know, the advice, which sounds like a cliche, is be yourself, right? And even that was kind of hard for me to get at the time, because I thought, well, I don't know who I am yet, right? So it's something that you eventually sort of discover for yourself. And I think with me, because the way I was creating effects and getting the outcome of magic was so different, that kind of became my silent script and my part of my character already. So it kind of happened for me automatically, just by, you know, it wasn't like, so for instance, I've got this idea where if you want to be a magician, right? Like, for instance, and you'll have to excuse the planes going over.
No problem, no worries.
Hopefully the microphone, it's not picking them up too bad. So let's say it was a TV show, right? And someone is portraying a magician or a film. So then all that's important is the effect, right? It doesn't matter how it's done. Like, it could be CGI, it could be a practical effect, like in camera, it could be actual magic methodology, right? So I think the problem arises when you're choosing material, right? You have to then decide what it is you want to share with your audience and what it is you want to do. So I think picking material is important as well, right? Because when we first get into magic, we tend to just buy everything, or we think, oh, that's great. So developing a character, I think it's kind of what are you most comfortable. What do you want to portray? What do you want to do? And for me, I've just realised that in the end, it's about having an experience with someone else and a group of people and just sharing that experience and having fun, right? Like, you're showing them something that looks impossible. In the past, in my work, I've wanted to be able to use it as a way to use metaphor and, you know, have more of a poetic kind of art to this, but that kind of just I never sort of pushed it into that realm. Maybe I will do in the future, but at the minute, it's kind of I just like things that look impossible, that's fun to do, right? So for me, I'm just being myself in that sense. But in terms of like portraying a magician, I think it comes down to what you want to do. Like, for me, there's not really a right and wrong answer. For instance, some people will just want to have fun when they go out and fun with their audiences and just show them things that look impossible, or, you know, some people will be going for the moment of astonishment style approach where it's all about creating that moment of pure astonishment. And some people will want to use metaphor and make it more poetic in that sense. So I think there's a time and place for everything. It's just, you've got to understand that that's what you're going for, to then do that in the best way that you can. Like, if you want to be a comedy magician, then you need to be funny, right? So you kind of have to just think about what you want to do, and it'll probably be personality driven, quite a lot of it, because as performers we tend to be a larger version of ourselves. So for instance, I don't really bring it into the magic, but I suppose the method is informed with this as well. But I read old magic as well, so I read philosophy and, you know, like Hermetic magic and Buddhism and stuff like this. So my understanding of the nature of reality and how it's illusory, you know, it kind of plays into that, so that to the point where I might talk a little bit more about that with my audience after a show or a group of people after I've performed. And that, I don't know whether I carry that with me as a real magician, like that sense. But I think like a silent script is important as well. Like, I think what your beliefs will sort of, if you allow them to, leak out as well, and that will be in your scripting and how you present things, right? So it's a real difficult question. It's probably the hardest question to answer, really, and it ends up boiling down to be yourself, you know, find out who you are and what you want to express. But yeah,
I totally get it. And tell us about your script writing process, and also at what time you used to do it. It's because usually in Mentalism, as a Mentalism creator, script writing process is very, very important, right? And also the time we are taking to write the script. So basically, some are like, you know, they will wake up early in the morning and watch sunrise, or can have a cup of coffee, and they will, you know, in the balcony or something, they will write it down. And some creators are like, they don't want to go and have a nice view. They can even like sit inside their room and write the script.
right.
So at what time, or like at where you actually spend your time to write the script, and what's the script writing process?
Okay, so what I do when I'm creating method as well, because the method and effect and the script are all sort of entwined with each other, I tend to I always write on a laptop, and I think the reason for that is because it means that I can edit as I go. So it's almost like I've got this dream world in front of me with the scripting, and I'm imagining it playing out, and I imagine it from different angles and perspectives, and I can just turn the phrases and just keep on changing and editing until it gets more and more refined and more how I want it to be, right? And so I do it on a laptop, so I can do it anytime. And I think that I go through stages of sort of being really inspired and really wanting to be creative, and then I think I sort of end up sort of focusing so much and becoming sometimes obsessed with certain things that I then end up having a few weeks off, right? And usually that's when I'm not in creative mode. Then I'm in the mode of having to write it out and, you know, getting it ready for like a product release or something like this. So it kind of, I mean, recently there's one thing that I became so obsessed with. I was staying up till 5 a.m, and this went on for like 2 weeks pretty much. I wasn't staying up late every night, but I was just working on this problem. And I had another good friend of mine, Ross Bartels. He's like a great soundboard and a great magician and creator in his own right. And he would like text me at like 5 a.m. and say, "Are you up?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm up." and he was working on it as well. So we were sort of going back and forth, and I was kind of leading the way on it, but he was testing things and looking at it from more of a sort of logical standpoint, as a way to test things out, whereas I was going with sort of intuition and hunches, which were often correct, or the ones that weren't correct ended up leading us ultimately to the final versions of this method that works. So I do get obsessed, like for instance, I'm working on a website at the moment as well, and it's not finished yet, but I think I've been doing that for a few months and probably a few years, like in the background, like slowly getting it to the point where I want it, because for some reason I've got like a real problem with putting text on things. So I've started to build a website that doesn't have any text on it, which obviously is like ridiculous, but it's just similar to how I didn't want to use sleight of hand or physical methods or compromises. This is a compromise I don't want to make aesthetically, and it's really causes me real problems, because it's almost like I'm having to reinvent a genre or reinvent how something typical would be done to be able to create something that I'm happy with, right? So I'm probably going to go back to the point where I put text on stuff again, but you'll notice like my book covers never have text on either, because I
will come to that when you finish answering this question, I will come to that.
Yeah, that's it. So as well as so script writing and creating, I tend to, I can do any time. I used to be quite nocturnal, so I would stay up till probably 3 a.m. most nights, and then probably wake up a little bit later, and that kind of seemed to be what my friends did as well, so I joke with Peter Turner now. I say, "What are you doing up?" Because normally we're like rise by about 10 o'clock, but since getting with my girlfriend, I decided to have weekends off, and evenings off. So it's fairly rare now that I'll work throughout the evening, because I would do literally like 12-hour days pretty much, because I was that sort of passionate, and it's what I needed to do. For me, without being creative and without having magic, I don't feel like I'd probably go crazier than I am now, right? So, but I did take a step back recently, which was unusual for me, because I could be up creating and writing right up till after midnight, like 3 a.m. But I've tended to structure my days more now, so I can do it any time, and sometimes it feels like I have to force myself to write, but the creative process, if I've got like an idea or a seed of an idea that I'm working on, then it doesn't feel like effort at all. It feels like that's when I'm happiest, is when I'm creating, when I'm in my own world, and time just goes by, like I'll look up and Jenny, my girlfriend's coming from work, and I've just been looking at the screen in my own world for hours without realizing where the time's gone.
Yeah, that's crazy. And talking about your book cover, this is actually like a fun question. And I know that there is a specific reason for that, but still, the audience wants to know. So if you're looking at almost every books in the book cover, it's actually a human body and especially female body.
Yeah.
So what's the reason behind it?
Okay, so it kind of it's an aesthetic thing, I think, but there's also symbolism in the covers as well, which I kind of go through different images, and I've only sort of got it wrong a few times where I've changed the image afterwards because it just wasn't right. But typically the image sort of just stands out, and I just know that that's the correct image. It's like that feels right, and it's odd, and typically there's sort of symbolism in the covers as well. So, for instance, I mentioned that I read old magic as well, like real magic and philosophy. So, for me, using the feminine form is reminding us of the feminine principle in magic, right? So the duality and the polarity that exists, but the subconscious mind as well, and then that's also connected with water. So the first book, like limited book, False Messiah, had a woman underwater, and one magician commented and was like, why do all your covers have drowning women on them? I don't get it. It's like, well, there's symbolism in there. And I think she was actually coming out of the water, like her head, like up towards, so it was sort of becoming conscious and, sort of within the subconscious, so bringing a thought out. And also they were in like a star position, which is like the five senses as well. So there's, more recently, Silent Poets, it's a woman upside down, but if you notice, her legs are crossed in the Mercury like symbol, which is like the tarot card of the Hanged Man. So it's like the midpoint to enter enlightenment, the rest point, and again it was feminine, whereas in the tarot it would be male, but that didn't seem to bother me. So that cover, it looks like just a gymnast or something, but it's actually, there is symbology in there as well.
And it's actually really interesting, and also I was actually wondering that if this ever happened, it will be really funny. For example, like maybe your girlfriend is calling you, pick up the phone, and you are pretty much busy in doing searching for the right picture, and when girlfriend is coming and you didn't even notice she's there, and when she's looking at you are looking at a laptop with a lot of pictures.
Well, she came in once and she says, have you found a cover? I said, yeah. She says, oh, so I'm going to see like semi-naked women on the website.
That's crazy.
Yeah. The other thing with this as well, and it kind of happened by accident, by not putting text on the images, because I just don't like how it looks aesthetically. It reminded me of album covers as well, where you would just literally have the image that sells the cover. And I remember looking at a documentary about Factory Records, which produced New Order and Joy Division before, as well as a few other bands. And they had like an in-house graphic designer. And for me, they kind of established a brand based on that graphic design. So for me, it kind of happened by accident, but it sort of became brand recognition to the point where if I just literally post a cover and nothing else, people instantly know it's mine, which is cool because it's got like an aesthetic. So that was kind of the reason as well behind it.
Perfect. Yeah, so I just have one more question and then we can go to your performance, okay?
Okay, man, yeah.
So yeah, it's like if you're looking at you, if you're researching about you, you haven't given any lectures, I think, for Penguin Magic or at the table, and also you are more of like an you independently release the effects, right? It's not like most of the people usually used to collaborate with Illusionist or Morpheus Magic or Penguin Magic or whatever the company is. So what's the reason behind it?
Originally, I got asked to do Penguin, and it was just after True Mysteries sort of broke and became popular, and I didn't feel like I had enough sort of material to go on there and sort of teach, So I don't know if in the future that'll be something that happens. I've just started to decide to do lectures now, and I'm also offering Skype sessions, which we can get to a few bits, which is like 2-hour teachings. So I've decided now to sort of not just not just put my work into books and write, but to sort of do one-on-one as well as like bigger lectures as well. So the reason for it really was because a lot of my work I've put into high-end releases, like expensive works, and I've limited quite a few books as well, right? So it's because I kind of started to like I sort of have a fan base almost, and it's something that I want to expand. And some of the time I will do larger releases with companies such as Murphy's, and that's helped sort of get my name out. And I think the first DVD did that as well. But since then, I kind of just, I don't know, by accident sort of became a like underground almost. Even though a lot of people are aware of my name and the work, it's not as widespread as I kind of wished it was, you know. Like it's nice that some of these things are hidden in expensive books that are limited, but
because not everyone will know about the methods. Yeah,
right. But then I also sort of feel like people will either use it or they won't, so I should have just released it, and then at least more people would have a record of, like, an understanding of just how far these ideas have been pushed, you know. Because my work gets better and better, you know, and one of the criticisms I've had in the past is that it feels like I'm just releasing one star sign guess after another and one name guess after another. But what typically happened is I would have a new principle or a new approach to something, and they were kind of my vehicles to show it working, because they have like built-in restrictions, like star signs. Because there's 12 of them and they're split up into different seasons and you know, different halves of the year and stuff like this, it sort of lends itself perfectly to being structured to find these different approaches that can then potentially be applied to other things as well. So I kind of, you know, use them as a vehicle, and my ultimate goal was to be able to get any word within reason proplessly, right? But the way I ended up teaching things, because I had only found ways to sort of get one or two letters up to that point, was to apply it to a name guess, because this is a natural restriction, like a common name, that you can easily nail down on to get to your outs, you know? So that was sort of the logical way to teach this new way in and this new idea or approach. So I kind of, so my work gets better and better, and I think, for me, it's not a case of, it becomes more and more refined, is what I should say, because it doesn't negate something that I've released in the past, because there's principles like within that work that will still be useful to people in their toolbox to apply to other things. So I think like all of the work is relevant, but I am on a journey, and it looks like I'm just releasing one star sign after another, one name guess after another, but it's really, that's not really the point. It's kind of, they're vehicles for expression, you know, but eventually I do want to be able to just get any word, because for me, if I'm not going to use a billet, I mean, I do use billets, as I've talked about, like I do use classic methods as well, but if and peak methods, but if I'm going to try to push it into the realms of where it's literally just verbal and that's it, then if you think about it, being able to divine any word or any letter pretty much means that you can divine anything, right? Yeah. So that was kind of the holy grail that I'm always pushing towards. And I have recently discovered something that I'm going to hold on to for a bit, and that's kind of as close to the holy grail as I think you can get for like being able to just nail words. And it's real quick and hardly any process. But that's for the future if I decide to write it up, you know. I'm thinking of maybe taking a break soon after this latest thing comes out, because I've kind of burnt myself out. I feel like I need to just focus on something else for a while, you know. But that's something that I'm really excited about, that I think, you know, in the future I might share. But a few friends I've shared it with, Peter Turner and a few others, they're like, this is good. This is real cool. So, crazy. So yeah, so I think that answers the question. I'm not sure.
Perfect. Okay, so now like I'm pretty much excited to see your performance. So let's start.
Yeah, so we can try some bits. One thing I didn't mention was I think I did actually. There's this drawing duplication, and this was based on what Feedham was doing, and he's a good friend of mine. He graciously allowed me to release my version of it, because it's basically, it was sort of had its foundation and start in his Proteus, but I didn't like the anagram aspect to it, so I took it out. So we'll try this, right? Okay, so what I want you to do is just imagine you're back at school and you're 10 to 12 years of age, and for whatever reason you're bored in the classroom. So I want you to imagine you've got a blank sheet of paper in front of you, and just draw in your mind now a simple drawing. So make this a simple object, or something that if you were to show someone else right now, they would instantly recognize what it is. Okay. So what's interesting is, as you did that, I couldn't help but draw something in my mind as well. So what do you feel is more likely? Do you feel that it's more likely that what I've drawn is the exact same image as what you've just drawn in your mind, or do you feel they're likely completely different?
It'll be completely different.
Okay, to the point where each attribute will likely be, complete opposite to each other as well. So with this in mind, do you feel that my drawing is natural or man-made? You can say this out loud.
Man-made.
Man-made. Okay. Do you feel it's something that you can easily hold in your hands, or is much larger?
It's something you can easily hold in your hand.
Okay, so I'll be honest with you, it is man-made that I'm thinking of, but it's something that's much larger that you can't hold in your hands. So just take your time, and when you feel like you've got what it is I've drawn in my head, just say this out loud.
Maybe a ball or box, something like that.
Okay, so it was actually a boat, right? But that's fine. That shows you just how difficult it is for a complete stranger to walk up to another stranger and, having never met them before, just be able to pull images and thoughts out of that person's head, right? And this is even after I gave you a few clues as to what I was thinking of. So without you giving me any clues whatsoever, I'm going to try to now get your the drawing that you just drew in your head. Okay, so just focus on this drawing in front of you. Okay, and just in your mind, imagine saying what this is just in your head, just over and over. So look at me. So this will be like, just keep saying it. It's like tree. This is a tree.
Yes, it is a tree.
Cool, man. So so I took the anagram out essentially, and that's kind of
I mean, this is so cool. I mean, this is so direct, right? I mean, it's not like you have to go like letter by letter.
Yeah, that's it. There's no anagram, and as well as this, I was a little bit bolder on the end there than I needed to be. But one of the things that I've discovered whilst doing this is that there's certain outs that are more favoured by people, right? So sometimes I can just sort of nail it down, but when I teach this, there's another principle that I use, which is real quick, that allows you to really nail down on what it is and be sure of it, whereas I sort of threw out that and hit, luckily.
So are you also actually teaching this in your Skype session?
Pardon? Yeah, this is I do go into this, at one point in the Skype session.
So before we go to the next performance, let me clarify something to the viewers. So I'm just asking a question in terms of for the viewers. So how do we sign up for your Skype session?
So the best thing to do at the moment for getting hold of any of my work or products is to either email me or private message me on Facebook. Because, like I said, I'm working on the website at the minute, and the state it's in at the minute, you can find stuff, but it's kind of difficult to use. So we can put the email in the
I will give it in the description. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that's the best way to do it, and then I can also offer certain deals for people that have tuned into this as well. So the Skype session is a 2-hour Skype session, and I teach my approach to Propless. So.
Perfect.
This is one of the things I can teach. I teach a name guess as well, a star sign divination, and a few bits. I did one 2 nights ago, and I ended up sort of teaching a lot more than what I planned on, but which was great because it was a nice organic session, and I wanted them to leave with the understanding really the approach and different things as well, and getting actual tricks out of it.
So I will give your website link and maybe something like Facebook and email ID in the description.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
I think
that's
your
good.
website is not yet fully completed, so I'll do one thing. I will give your email and Facebook ID in my description so that the viewers can actually message you or email you and sign up for the Skype session.
Great. Yeah, that's fine, and that's the way to do it really. So yeah, so I mentioned I do a name guess as well, so I could show you that if you want. Yeah.
Okay.
So I feel recently you've had a few different people on your mind. There's one person in particular that's sort of standing out to me, and this is a male person. And I don't think that this is like an obscure name, and I don't think it's you wouldn't be thinking of this person right now as having a nickname. I don't think. So you know who this is that I'm on about, right? You've got someone in mind, right? Yeah. So is this like a friend or family member? It's someone that's been on your mind recently, right? Which is how I was able to just start to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason you pause there, I think, is because it was. I think this person's been in the back of your mind, and you've only just realised why it's relevant. But this is what I do: is I tend to pull things out of the subconscious mind as well. So I haven't got all of the details yet. So what I want you to do is there any way I could just know who this is or what this person's name is? There's not, right?
No way.
No. Okay. So just focus on the first letter in the name for me. Okay.
Okay.
And now just jump to the second letter in the name.
Okay.
Okay. And have you seen like psychics where they would take out a deck of tarot cards and they would give you a reading based on the cards? You're aware of that, right? So that's what's known as an oracle. Whereas that is a physical oracle, what I want to do now is just going to be a metaphysical oracle that exists purely in your mind, okay? So the letter that you're on now, jump to a completely different random letter of the alphabet. So just jump wherever you want in the alphabet. And when you've got a different new letter in mind, I want you to come up with a characteristic or trait that begins with this new letter that you feel might describe this person in some way.
Ambitious.
Okay. So now I want you to jump back to the very first letter in the name. And it's essentially you don't say anything out loud until I ask, because I don't want to know your thought process. So just jump to the next letter of the alphabet. And when you've got this new letter in mind, just come up with a negative characteristic or trait that begins with this new letter. And you can say this out loud.
Negative characteristics, right? Maybe dull.
Okay, so just to recap, I had you focus on specific letters in the name, and then each time I got you to jump to a completely different random letter of the alphabet. And the reason for this was just to help you, just to on the spot come up with characteristics and traits. And I don't feel like we can just be summed up by one or two traits, right? But this is helping me get a sense of this person. So, okay, so while you've had this person in your mind, I've had a few different impressions about this person. This is. Can you think of the name, but think of it in its abbreviated form? So just imagine the name written in front of you in the abbreviated form. Okay, and just keep saying this to yourself over and over.
All right. Okay.
Just in your head. So I'm going to go with this.
Okay.
So this is five letters long, right? Just say the name.
Chris.
Chris. Good.
What? What? I used to love you, but I don't love you anymore. I hate you.
It's cool, right?
That's crazy.
So, I mean, that performance is, I don't know, a minute and a half. And, if you wanted to, you could add a reading to that. But it's a real nice way to go about this. There's also someone else that was on your mind. It threw me a little bit because I feel like you had a few different people going through your mind. But I actually think this person is...
Actually, in the beginning, I thought of an Indian name. But then I thought that Indian name might be hard to pronounce for you. So then I went for like a common name. Yeah,
so thanks for doing that. But there's also someone else, and I think this is in your subconscious as well. It's another male person beginning with the letter J. Can you think of who this is without saying this person's name?
Okay.
Yeah. So just focus on the name written in front of you. Okay. Again, if you can think of it in its short form, then do that.
Short
just,
form, right?
just in your mind, just count the amount of letters. Okay, so this is
Okay.
right. Okay, I'm gonna go with just focus on the second letter. Just keep saying this over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Just like A. Just keep saying this letter to yourself. Okay, I'm gonna go with this. You didn't go for Josh, did you?
No.
No. What name was it?
Pretty much close, but John.
John. Good. I'm glad I committed with John in this case.
What?
So you can sort of stack them as well. so that other one is called the Gypsy Name Guess, and it's by Ross Taylor. The first name guess is mine, called Rose. And
No, wait a minute, wait. What just happened? I mean, wait. Give me a second. I mean, like, no, you just did something mind blowing, and you are going in a very casual way, like acting like nothing happened.
yeah, because I'm used to just getting the hits now and just playing with this, which is cool. But typically I'll tie the two together, right? And I just wanted to highlight this because what I could have done, right, which also helps throw off the method for the first name guess, and I just forgot to do it like in this interview. I would say just yes or no. Does this begin with the letter J, right? And I'd get a no there, right? Because I would throw out a letter that I know isn't in the name, right? Isn't the first letter of the name, because I've got that far down in the method that I know that, right? And then I can say, oh, okay, but I feel like there is someone who's been in the back of your mind, or someone that's close to you or relevant in your life somehow, beginning with a J, and this is a male as well. Can you think of who this is? And then they get it, right? Or you just realize by them nodding that there is someone, right? And they find someone, and then you say, okay, so just put that to the back of your mind, go back to the original name, and we'll try and get that later. And now I've essentially just allowed myself to get 2 hits. And what's nice is I throw out that letter for the second name guess, but because of that time misdirection, they forget that I've said that. And even if they remember, it doesn't matter. And for me, this is just a beautiful, fun thing, because it's like, it's kind of mimicking what psychics do. So they go on stage and they throw out names randomly, right, all over the place. Whereas this allows you a structured way to appear to know and to nail down on a specific outcome and to get it right. But all the way through the process, theoretically, it looks like you're actually picking up on that information. So when like Jay is like their dad or their brother or someone at work, you know, like their boss, of course that's how you're getting it, because you are reading their mind. So everything adds up beautifully, and the method becomes the effect, you know. And that's the nice thing about these types of methods, is presentationally it looks exactly how it should look.
But these are very much bold, right? Everyone won't be able to pull it off, right?
I think it's practice, and I think understanding the methods correctly, you know. So obviously, you know, you need the books to learn this fully. And I'm always available, you know. I try to get back to people as best as I can, even when I'm busy. So even if people, you know, that have the work or buy the work struggle with an aspect, they can ask me questions on it as well. So I'm typically quite good with getting back at and sort of helping people with the material as well.
That's good to know that.
Yeah, man. So that's name guesses, and there's a plethora of different ones in Opus, which is for people that sort of want to get sort of like a snapshot of like some of my best work. Opus is a good way to go, because it's kind of like a 6-hour video project, and it's got different things on it, and it's also got a name guess that's different to that, which is more updated, that I now use instead of Rose. But you know, it depends how I feel as well. I sometimes just, you know, grab different methods off the shelf that I've got. So let's play a game. Just, you know, have you got a coin on you?
One sec. Yeah.
Okay, so just show me the coin, just so that everyone knows that you genuinely have got one and we're not messing about. Okay, so I want you to put that behind your back and just switch back and forth a few times. Okay. and then just bring both fists out like this so that I can't tell which hand it's in. So just because I think Skype reverses the view, just show me which hand the right hand is. Okay, so put it back. So I'm just going to guess for this first round. I think it is in the right hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, show everyone. Good. So I want you to do the exact same. I want you to do the same thing again, the same game, right? So it's essentially, remember. So just bring them out for now. Okay. So just show where the coin is. I don't want people to think that you like put it in your pocket or anything. So it's essentially, remember how many times you switch back and forth in a moment and where the coin ends up, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to read your mind. So put your hands behind your back, just switch back and forth a few times. Okay, and just when you've done that, just to keep this random, just do the exact same thing again. Just do that, and then when you've done this, bring both out like this. Okay, good. So I'm going to go with this. Just focus on where it is. So it's good that you didn't just look, because sometimes people give that away. So I think you're trying to mess with me, and you think that it's probably less obvious to go with the same hand again in the right hand. Is that right? Yeah? Good. So we'll do it one more time. So just do the same thing again. Put it behind your back. Switch back and forth a few times. And then again, just to keep this random, do the same thing again. Just behind your back. And now I'm going to give you one last choice. Do you want to keep it in the hand that it's in now, or switch hands?
Switch hands.
Okay, so switch hands, and then bring them out like this.
Okay.
Good. So now this becomes easier. Now I sort of know your thought process. It's in the left hand this time, right?
Yeah. Or maybe I think maybe in the first two times I actually kept it in my right hand. Is that why you went for the left?
No, so there's actually a method happening there, but you know, obviously, and that's typically one phase, and then I've got other methods, but I decided to sort of, you know, like use it a few times in that. So that's cool.
This is actually cool. I mean, like there are many versions of like which hand one routine, like Tequila Hustler, or like, you know, there are many methods out there, but still this is actually direct, right?
Yeah, it's real direct. I remember showing Ian Rowland this, and he was just like, wow. He was like just looking at me from across the table, just shaking his head for like 2 minutes. So I was really proud that he thought it was like, he said, yeah, that's worthy of your sort of thinking. That's great. So I was pleased that he really loved it, you know. And it was something that just sort of came to me. Well, it didn't really come to me. I sort of got there through a specific sort of route. But the important thing about that was making it look like nothing's happening, like hiding it to the point where the presentation itself is the method, and therefore it may as well be real. And that's kind of, you know, that's what I sort of want to demonstrate with showing a few of these effects, is that hopefully people can see that presentationally it's, you know, it's not like this long process that has to happen that doesn't make any sense. It's pretty much just how you would do this anyway, which is cool. And for the last thing I want to show you for this reason is my star sign guess, right? So my Sonda star sign guess, because you'll see that this is just completely conversational, and for me this is how it should look, right? If you're going for like that psychic-esque aesthetic, or someone who does this for real. Okay, so I'll just go into this. So there's certain crossover signs, and so that this doesn't become confusing, if you're a Cancer sign, I want you to, for this, just imagine you were born in the first half of the year, and if you're born as a Capricorn, imagine you were born in the second half of the year, and this just stops this being confusing, right? So typically, people who consider themselves being more creative types would have a red aura color, whereas those who consider themselves more analytical thinkers and more logic-based would have a blue aura color. So with this in mind, you've now got an aura color in mind for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And the only way that I could know what this aura color is if I could either genuinely read you, or if I could actually see aura colors, which I think is actually quite a load of nonsense. But this is how they would go about this typically. So as well as this, the different star signs would also fall into each of these color categories. So I want you to just remember what color relates to your sign. So Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Leo, Virgo, Libra would be red signs. Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn would be blue. So just yes or no, does your star sign's color match the aura color you just had in your mind?
No.
Oh, okay. And, again, this might all just be a load of nonsense, but this doesn't tell me anything, right? You weren't born towards the, beginning, the first half of the year, were you? You weren't born in the first half, but you was, right? Because I sense with you, you're quite a loyal individual and you're quite trustworthy, but it's only really when other people show themselves to be fully trustworthy is when they would fully commit in a relationship with someone else and sort of share on that much about themselves. And that tells me that you were born, in that half of the year. So what's really interesting is when I first sat down in front of you, I instantly felt that you was a Cancer. Is that it?
What? I mean, yeah, it is my zodiac sign is Cancer, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, and you'll just have to believe that I haven't researched that and that it's
I think I need to I can't believe that, so I don't know how viewers will believe it, but still, let me be honest here. I think you haven't searched up on me, right?
No, and I assumed that you could make one up if you wanted to anyway, because obviously, I think in Pete's interview, I think he guessed your star sign as well. But no, that's genuinely the method just working. There was one kink that I had to just use my intuition to get around, and people with the method all know what that is. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much nailed on because of the structure of the scripting, which is really cool.
I mean, I think one thing which I noticed is that your methods are not only bold, but it is very direct. It's not like a progressive anagram type. I mean, where we'll say, okay, is the first letter this or the second letter this. It's not like that. This is actually pretty much direct, right?
Yeah, I mean,
crazy.
yeah, for me, that fits the aesthetic of giving a reading. So typically I would give a reading in and amongst that performance. And I've got another idea that I call cheat reading, which is where I claim that I've read them. So I just say to them, while you've been sat with me, I've had different impressions hit me, and based on all the characteristics and traits that I'm getting from you, I feel there's only one sign you could be, and that's typically when I'm going to my out, right? And obviously the scripting changes depending on what's actually going on in the performance. But what's interesting about that is now when I hit, it's the confirmation principle in terms of the hit means that the reading must be accurate, right? Or certain aspects of it. But I've never actually had to verbalize the reading. They've just took for granted that in order for me to get the star sign right, I must have actually picked up on correct impressions. So that's a way to cheat and not actually give a reading if you want to keep this shorter, because I know that it does rely on this conversational sort of style, and it should seem as if you're sort of reading them all the way through in terms of characteristics, I suppose, like aura colours and depending on what presentation you want to use. But that's what I go for. And if you want to keep it short, I would do the readings. The cheat reading that I just tipped.
I think if you didn't become a mentalist, you would have become like a tarot card reader or a psychic, I think.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like you either deny
and
that
you can make a lot of money from it by sitting at your home and do online Skype session by reading tarot card reading or something like that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm sure I could go out and fake it pretty convincingly. But what's cool is I could give readings and then use these types of methods to bolster the reading and get specific information and hits along the way, which for me is sort of the way to do star sign guesses or date of birth guesses. Even names, sort of, oh, recently you've had someone on your mind, I'm getting an M, can you think of who this is? Yes. Right. But also specifying that it's a male to make your job easier and stuff like this. With the right performance, theatrically, it looks exactly how it should look. So it may as well be real. And that's all we want, really, isn't it? Is to create the illusion of realistic magic. And that's it.
So let me ask you something. Sorry to interrupt, by the way.
That's
So
all right,
the thing is that we know that you have like certain kind of bold methods which you can get in easily get information using your bold techniques. So we are not going into the techniques, but I just want to know, is there any incident in your career where you really used your intuition while reading it? And if it happens, just explain one of the best experience you ever had using your intuition really for real.
Yeah, so I used to do this a lot, and it's Kenton Knepper's method, my mentor. It's called the mind reading. It's called Mind Reading, the book that this originated in as an idea. And without tipping it, you genuinely use your intuition. And when you see why that allows you to do that, it's beautiful as a method. So you can do it without risk of failure. And what happens is, by using your genuine intuition, you end up being right a lot of the time. So I have done this, at real specific things as well. And I can't really remember sort of the best instance of this because they were all, shocking for people. There was one recently actually, and I was at a wedding, and this girl was sort of sat on her own on the table because I think the group were going off doing something. And I just did a few bits, and pushed this reading a little bit far. And it was great, actually. I've just remembered another time, actually. So this one does stand out to me, but I'll finish the first story. So this girl sort of went for it. She was like, yeah, felt it was real. So she told her boyfriend she thought I was real, right? So I'm just about to leave, and then he comes over and says, oh, do a trick to me then. Like, my girlfriend's convinced you're real. I says, well, no, it's not real, in that sense. So I thought, because he's already skeptical, I'm just going to use a billet to be safe, right? And I go to get my peak, and it's blank. It's not written on. So I was like, oh, okay. So I just used the Propless method and nailed him with that. And then I says, to be honest with you, I feel like you left this blank on purpose. And he was just floored, because it was like, there was no way for me to get it, right? But I just used rows on him and got it, which was cool. Another instance, there was a really skeptic girl, right? And one of my friends was at this event, and she was on the same table, and she was like, you've got to see my friend, right? And I could just tell, mate, wasn't giving me anything, right? So I tried an effect, and not really any reaction. She's like, oh yeah, but you could have moved the card without me seeing it and stuff like this, right? So in my head I just went, oh, I'll go for it then. So I just used this mind reading method and just gave such an accurate reading, like real specific, like recently you've split up with your boyfriend. I feel like you're living with a friend at the moment. You're actually on their couch, and I think they're here today. And then I sort of like got from where she was sort of trying to look that it's her, right? And then did something else and this name means something to you. Like, no method, just doing it. And she was literally, mate, her mouth was like on the floor, like wide open, like, what is this? Like, how? Because
Like
she had come to it with like pure skeptic, like, not like it's a trick. But I just took the trick aspect out of it. And then if none of it had hit, but only some of it had hit, so what? But I managed to hit that much that it became like really scary for her, So that was cool. That's the time. I forgot. That's all. But that's the one that does stand out to me, because there's been so many instances of this. It's hard to find one.
Yeah. So let me ask you something. So according to you, in your thoughts, in your perspective, how can we take any effect, whether it is a Propless or whether it uses any gimmick or whatever, how can we take any mentalism effect and make it look real?
I think, again, that's how you want to present it theatrically, because if I'm getting a peak on a billet, then I've got to then let my presentation work that out. So, like I said before, my methods run on the same lines as the presentation and the effect, and that's how I build them. So they kind of have the script built in, or the silent scripts built in with that. And you might want to flower it up and do a presentation and a different presentation angle, or a metaphor or something. You might want to not have it as bare bones as I do, but so it really just takes care of itself for me. I think for other people, then I think you have to not think of it as a trick, right? If you're thinking of it as I'm going to show people some tricks that are really impressive, then that's what you're gonna communicate, right? So maybe having like an air of mystery in the sense that, you know, like David Blaine, for instance, used to use like silence as a really powerful thing. You know, I'm not saying be silent, but you know, let the moment breathe and just sort of like, for instance, you mentioned when I performed that I just took it for granted that I could do it. I think that's a really strong way to show people that you do this and it's possible. And they're you know, and other people think that it's sometimes nice to be just as surprised with that you got it as them, you know, and maybe there's a time and place for that as well. But you just have to think about how you want it to look outwardly. Like when I'm creating, I'm always imagining it playing out, you know, and visualizing it from different perspectives. If the method has like this kink that gets resolved later on, for instance. So I think it's dream about it, what you want it, what you want to create.
I think what you said is actually true, but I think we had to be very
practical,
very serious and very selective about the personality we choose for performing. For example, where you said about mentioned about David Blaine. So what he does is, whatever the effect he perform, after his performance he doesn't get excited. So basically he's looking at the people like, and they are going crazy, and David Blaine is like,
well, what that allowed to happen was everyone to fill in the meaning of the experience for themselves.
Yeah, and the problem is that if you are trying to imitate his style, maybe let's say, for example, if I'm performing and after the performance I'm like, maybe I will look creepy for the audience, but when Dave Blaine does it, it doesn't look like creepy. But that's my point. So I think we have to be very selective about the character that we are going to play
what
with.
you want to do, yeah. And some people will just go out and be really fun. I've got one friend who does close-up, and he's brilliant at it. You know, he does stuff that he performs in a way that I don't think I could ever do, because it doesn't suit my style. Mm-hmm. But he rocks the whole place. Everyone has fun, and they all have a great experience. And that's because he's really sort of outward, like really personable, really, you know, comedy elements as well, and just really sort of does a good job. And there's a time and place for that. But we joke with each other all the time, because I say, yeah, I'll never use an Omni deck or sponge balls or stuff like this, you know, because I've decided to go for what looks, in my mind, real, you know. But for me, it doesn't mean that I don't like magic, because for me, some of the great magicians like Slidini, right? His coins through table is beautiful, you know, and it plays as sort of real, you know. It looks like really strong, real magic. You sense that guy can do things, you know, and you have that where you forget about the disbelief, you know, the suspension of belief for a moment. And I think the best magic for me does that, you know, and it isn't just cheapened to like tricks, even though we are using tricks, you know. So it's important that I don't ever say that I would say, if I was pushed, I'm not psychic, you know, but then I just leave it open for them. I just show them something. And I suppose what one of my roles is as a magician, like worthy of the name, is I'm kind of reminding people to look deeper than the surface appearance of things. Whether you state that directly or not, you're presenting them something that in their current understanding of reality doesn't make any sense. But they sort of, if you wanted to push that, you could remind them that actually a lot of life experience is illusory, you know? Like it doesn't mean that it's not real, because if I hit my head on something, it would hurt. So it's a real dream, but it's still illusory and dreamlike in that way as well, you know? So it depends how far you want to push it. Like if you think of it as an art form, then I would go down that path of using metaphor and talking about the nature of reality in the best, in ways that aren't just going to look like lecturing and
okay.
you know, it just needs to be an expression of what you want to share, essentially, you know.
All right. So I'll just ask like a very small 2 questions, and we can wind up the session.
Okay,
So
man.
these questions were actually I was planning to ask in the beginning, but then I later when we talked I forgot it. So that's why.
Yeah.
So how do you define mentalism, and what's your philosophy about mentalism?
So for me, mentalism, like I mentioned before, goes back to old magic. Like actually, the first principle of magic is mentalism, and that's where the name comes from, in Hermetic magic, right, from Egypt. And the idea there is that all is mind and the universe is mental. So literally, all experience and reality is contained in mind. So all is mind. So then you start to realize that, okay, so there's a vibratory aspect to that as well as one of the principles, which then forms letters, vowels, vowels, consonants, and words. And then we understand the world by the labels we put on the world, so the words that we speak. So then you realize that the words that we use as a magician can literally shift perception and are powerful. So in a very real sense, in a practical way it works, because obviously you've seen these methods playing out now and working, but also in philosophical thought and actual magic, it has this correlation as well. So I think magicians, worthy of the name, should at least be aware that symbols and words and suggestion have an impact. And whether magicians are aware of it or not, they're always using symbols, right? Like when you make something appear, that's an allegory of birth. When you make something disappear, it's death. And then we have effects where there's transformation, which is how you transform through life and how thoughts can become your reality with proper mental focus. So these things I think you can think about in terms of being a magician and carrying that as a symbol throughout your life, and it goes into your real life experience as well as your performance life, right? That's if you want to go that far. Otherwise you can just do tricks and have fun, which is nothing wrong with that either, but that's still part of it, because you're still doing that. As long as you're aware that that's what you're doing, then you'll be able to do that really well, and keep on learning from everything around you that you see. I also learn from, I'm always looking at different media that isn't necessarily magic related and learning. I look at comedy, I look at film, and I look at other art and aspects of art to inform what I want to do as a performer and creator. So that's my sort of understanding of magic, but you don't have to go that deep necessarily. It's fine, but that just works for me. But I do forget it from time to time. Most of the time I'm just thinking this looks impossible and it's cool. I don't really operate on that deep level. I kind of forget about it, but it's something that I've always wanted to bring into my magic fully, but haven't really got around to it yet, which is my own fault, really.
Perfect. So let me ask one more thing, and then we can end the session. So for the beginner mentalist out there, and if they want to become a full-time professional, what are the best books you can recommend to them, and you can even include yours as well?
Yeah, so I would say Practical Mental Effects by Anneman is great, because he's a great thinker and a genius. Obviously, Corinda's recommended a lot. I genuinely didn't read either books when I started creating, but I was aware of classic method, like billets, switches, stuff like this. So there's no harm in reading them. And one of the things Peter Turner, my friend, has done recently is go back to old texts, because there's real beautiful gems and pieces in there that you can mine and sort of make your own, So I'd recommend just sort of going back to the old books as well, and just learning as much as you can. It's great to sort of get the latest and greatest thing, but there is gold in these older books as well. And Pete actually showed me something recently that that wasn't the same, but it was sort of similar and getting towards one of his methods, like the Guess Who method. And it wasn't the same, but it was like, wow, like, you know, you forget that these greats from the past have sort of had similar thoughts and got to similar places. Obviously, we've moved it on a lot as well, I think. But it's like a privilege, and it's great to be considered as sort of one of the people behind pushing the art form forwards, and be recognised in this group. You know, with like Peter Turner, Michael Murray, and Ross Taylor, a few others. It's really nice to hopefully when we look back on this, it'll be sort of an era where we've pushed things forwards, and you know, almost like a mini renaissance in the art form. And I don't just mean Propless. I mean the things that Pete does by combining the two, as well as his classic thinking on classic things, is also, you know, normally so beautiful and moved on, that I think we're in a real great period at the minute of innovation and moving it forwards in sort of leaps and bounds. Like what we've done in the past like 5 or 6 years, if you had asked any of us, like, or performed some of this stuff on us, we would have gone, what? You know, we wouldn't have believed that it could have moved on this much, I don't think. So it's a real privilege to be part of all that, you know.
So with that being said, thank you so much, Fraser, for doing this interview.
No worries, man.
It means a lot to us. It means a lot to us, and also looking forward for your future releases as well.
Great, man. Yeah, so if you just check the comments, and then you'll be able to see how to get hold of me, or the description. Yeah. And then that's the best way to look in, like, get hold of my work, and I can do discounts.
So I will give your mail ID and Facebook link in the description, so people can actually get connect to you easily.
That's it. So thanks for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.